And as we know in primaries, it's all about turnout. So we'll see if Bowman's able to get out maybe more of the vote than what we expect.
Well, what does it look like here? Is this could be a difficult night for him? What does your polling show?
Yeah, we have Latimer up by 17 points. He was up about 48%. This was done a couple of weeks ago. There was about 21% that were undecided. So technically, you can see there's a range that Bowman could pick up some late support. You saw some rallies over the weekend. I think Bernie Sanders, Senator Sanders was there, AOC. They did some back-to-back rallies. We'll see if that turns out a big turnout. But the early vote, the numbers we were looking at this morning, seems to be favoring Latimer a little bit as far as where that vote is coming from those, first couple of days.
Well, when we consider where the vote is coming from, it's also a question of the age of the voter, right? Spencer, I noticed in your polling, voters over 40 tend to break to Latimer, but Bowman is leading voters under 40. So does this really come down to that youth vote, if you will, and whether or not they show up tomorrow?
It will. And in this district, that youth vote is not as strong as in other parts of the country, even in other parts of New York City. So this is not going to be, we're not expecting an overwhelming youth turnout. If he's able to get one, we'll see if he can narrow that lead, particularly in the Bronx. But there's also going to be a very strong older vote. And that's what we normally see in these primaries. And that's where he struggles. He's trailing 2-1, 3-1 in that older vote. And, it looks like about 10,000 people voted early as well. We'll see how that vote breaks, because those will be some of those early numbers we see tomorrow night.
Well, Spencer, we want your take on the big debate this week from your perch at Emerson College Polling Center. I can only imagine the watch party in the little building on Thursday night. But based on history, should we expect to see a bump for one candidate or the other here? There's been a lot of talk about how it could be different this time as well, because a lot of folks won't hear anything about it till they go on Twitter the next day.
Well, we'll see. Traditionally, the first debate does not go well for the incumbent president. We've seen this historically with Ronald Reagan back in 1984. We see it with George Bush in 2004. So that even Barack Obama didn't have a good first debate. In fact, some people would say that it was Vice President Biden that helped him out in 2012 against Ryan. So that first debate's tough for the incumbent. It'll be interesting to see how President Biden handles that, if he's able to kind of buck the trend of that incumbency and is able to have a strong debate, considering how early this debate is in the cycle. Generally, these don't come out till September, and having this now in June puts a lot of pressure on both candidates because neither is technically their party's nominee. So it'll be interesting to see if there's any fallout from the debate.
Yeah, just presumptives sharing a stage on Thursday evening. It certainly is an interesting moment in history, Spencer. What will also be interesting is where they go after for the debate spin, the post-debate spin, rather. Despite all of our conversation that we have on this program and others like it across all of the networks about the swing states ultimately being the deciding factors, Donald Trump is going to spend Friday in Virginia, and Joe Biden's going to New York and New Jersey. Should we be expanding our swing state list?
Well, I do think we need to be looking at some other states that traditionally have voted mostly Democrat. For example, Minnesota. We've done a couple of polls out in Minnesota where we've had it very close to tied. And that's a state that we're keeping an eye on. We have not polled Virginia yet, but we have seen other polls out there that have that race close to tied as well. New York, I think, is an interesting example. We have it at 7 points. Our friends over at Siena have it at 8 points. That's a state where Biden wins by 23 points. And we'll see if those numbers hold or if Biden's able to get his base and be able to put that coalition back together.
So if you're standing at the corner of Boylston and Tremont, pulling people aside today, Spencer, and asking them about the guilty verdict, what are they going to tell you? And is this going to come up on Thursday night?
Well, Joe, at Boylston and Tremont, the guilty is, there's a big party here. This is one of Biden's strongest, probably, corners of the country. But outside in the rest of the country, they're pretty much split on it. A plurality of voters, it didn't impact their vote. I think overall for that independent vote, and that's a key vote here because Biden's losing independents right now in these swing states, and he won them back in 2020, is that they find it less likely that they're going to support Trump because of it. It's a slight number there. It's about 3-1, and it's, again, a small percentage. But in a race that could come down to the margins, that issue overall seems to not be a benefit. But we'll see how far it goes, honestly, in the debate as well, how far Biden's pushing that message moving forward.
Well, does the polling suggest, Spencer, that there's another message he should be pushing that is more effective when we talk about those independent voters, the ultimately ones who will decide the outcome of this election? What message do they need to be targeted with?
Well, independents fall more with Republicans in that the economy is their top issue. For Democrats, there's more of a splattering of issues. Economy's up there, but so is healthcare and education, and a couple of, the environment would be a higher issue on the Democratic side. So talking about the economy will be important. But I think he's got an overarching message that he needs to get back to from 2020, which was his concept of a return to normalcy. And that's where the country, I think, is looking at and is a little weary at the moment. You see it in his approval numbers and when we ask if we're headed in the right or wrong direction. So looking at that vision of where the future is going to be over the next 4 years, if he was to be reelected, I think will be important for him to lay out. And to address the economy. The economy is a tough issue for him because more people see Trump as better on that topic. So he'll have to try to frame it in a way that he's at least able to compete with Trump, because, as I mentioned, that is the top issue for those independent voters.